Today we're talking about the emergence of sell-side quality of earnings, and our moderator is Tom Thomas, who is a partner at the Transaction Advisory Services practice of FGMK, where he joined in 2005 as a partner. He's amassed 20 years of experience working on both buy and sell-side assignments. He's a magna cum laude graduate from Winona State in accounting, and not surprisingly, holds a CPA certificate and is a member of the AICPA and the Illinois CPA Society. More important to us, he's an active member of our board of directors and former treasurer of MBBI. Tom's experience includes buy and sell-side due diligence, transaction negotiations, financial and tax structuring, transaction valuation, and financial projections for owner-managed, private equity-owned, and domestic and foreign-owned entities operating around the world. His experience by industry is broad and includes healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, service businesses, and construction. So, I would postulate, who better to lead today's discussion? Without further ado, please welcome Tom, who will introduce our panel.
Thank you all for coming. It wasn't until about 2 weeks ago that I kind of connected the dots that this was at the same time that March Madness was starting, so I was a little worried that we were going to have some attendance issues, but then I thought, you know, the professionals that are looking to really better their practice and close more deals, they'll come. And I'm happy to see that we've got a great turnout today, so thank you all for coming. So what we're going to talk about here today is that financial due diligence has been going through a bit of a transformation and an evolution in recent years. And it's specifically talking about sell-side financial due diligence. It's gaining acceptance here in the U.S. marketplace, and it's been common practice in Europe for quite some time, but it's really starting to take hold here as a tool for the M&A community. So we've been fortunate enough to have two experts who have been spending quite a bit of time in financial due diligence, especially sell side lately, and so we're happy that they're here to share their views on the subject. So first we've got Michael Beccarella. Michael is director with BKD and leads their Chicago Transaction Services team. BKD is a national CPA firm headquartered in Springfield that recently acquired Wolf & Company. At Wolf & Company, Michael pioneered the private equity services and financial due diligence practices. His practice provides buy and sell-side transaction consulting services, including financial due diligence, transaction structuring, post-transaction planning, and transaction assistance. Michael has led numerous deal teams on acquisition and recapitalization transactions in the middle market. Michael is a CPA, CGMA, member of the American Institute of CPAs, an Illinois CPA Society member, and a member of Plan Sponsor Council of America. Michael is involved with MBBI, ACG, and the National Association of Certified Valuators and Analysts. To Michael's left is Steve Brady. Steve is a partner with FGMK's Transaction Advisory Services. Steve has over 30 years of experience and is dedicated to advising clients to realize value from middle market transactions across multiple sectors. Steve's expertise is in buy-side and sell-side due diligence, merger integration, and other advisory services for mergers and acquisitions. Steve has led a wide variety of cross-border and domestic projects for private equity firms and portfolio companies, family offices, and strategic acquirers. Prior to joining FGMK, Steve served in leadership roles at global and regional accounting and advisory firms. He was most recently the managing partner of Grant Thornton's Transaction Advisory Services practice in Chicago and the Midwest for 10 years, and served as the national managing partner for Transaction Advisory Services for 3 years. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
So we've got, part of the way we've got this set up is more of a panel, is a discussion format. So as we're going through, if you've got questions on what we're going through and some of the content and want to further explore, please raise your hand. I think to get some participation, make it more dynamic, and that'll be great. We'll love to work it in. There will be time at the end for questions and answers too. So let's start off. Steve, what factors led to the emergence of sell-side due diligence?
Yeah, the seeds of sell-side due diligence started many years ago in Europe. It's known as vendor due diligence there. There are some fundamental differences. Most importantly, that in Europe, the party doing the vendor due diligence has a responsibility ultimately to the buyer. But anyways, that's where the seeds of this started, and certainly the concept was floating back and forth across the pond a little bit throughout the 2000s. But then when the global financial crisis hit, that is really when it started to get some legs here in the U.S. that because of broken deals, because of deals not being able to get to the finish line, because in those days when guys like us were on the buy side, everything we picked up fell apart because of various factors in due diligence. So it started to emerge that the technique that we'll talk about had great value to help sellers position their company and work with the investment bankers and their sell-side diligence advisors to make sure deals can get done. And it's really taken off from there.
Excellent. And so, Michael, who's driving the train?
Well, who's driving the bus? I would say, for the most part, it's a lot of the investment bankers in the room. The broken deal side of things doesn't make anybody happy. But quite honestly, it's a lot of us. It's the CPAs in the room. Not that we just want to make more money off our clients, which is not the case. But what really comes to play is that, especially right now, we've got a lot of baby boomers in their stage of getting close to sale. And they were our clients in the CPA firm, and they have been for 10, 15, 20 years. We want to do right by them when they go to market to sell. So I could see not only the investment bankers not wanting deals to die, but the CPAs that want to do right by their clients.
Yeah, I'll just add to that on the investment banker side, coming into the question you asked in Tom, that early on it was the larger investment banks that started doing sell-side diligence, and that has continued to filter down to the more middle market focused investment banks and into the boutiques, and certainly into folks like yourself. It continues to emerge in different levels of the investment banking community.
Yeah, I would say definitely the investment bankers, and there's quite a few in the room. We hear the horror stories that come out, when guys like us going on the buy side to just destroy things from our buyer perspective. It's not often you come across a really good sell side product or a company that's done the work up front to save themselves from the black spot that buy side is going to put on them. So I'd say definitely that's what's definitely driving the bus.
Excellent. So Steve, why don't you tell us what is sell-side financial due diligence and what are the objectives of it?
Yeah, so fundamentally, sell-side due diligence, somewhat common sense, is the flip side of buy-side due diligence. The process is very similar, as we'll get into, but it's engaging someone to go in and perform the due diligence process up front in concert with the investment bankers and the other advisors on the transaction. Generally running through the same kind of process you would run on the buy side, doing it on the sell side. But again, we'll kind of get into all the different flavors there are of sell side due diligence, and they do vary all over the map. But it's working with the client. We get engaged by the client, i.e. the seller, and but as we've said, very important that we're working in concert as a team member with the investment bankers and certainly the M&A attorneys. Because a big part of it, getting to the objectives part of your question, Tom, is to simply we're validating the story that's going to be told in the SIM, and certainly for the many of the investment bankers that I'm closest with and we do a ton of work for, like to kid themselves that thank goodness for this process, because now people will actually believe what we put in the SIM, whereas there's always that skepticism otherwise that it's just being written trying to sell the company. So again, at a high level, the objective is to validate that story, certainly to increase adjusted EBITDA, to put a lot of issues on the table, but certainly that's at a high level what the objectives are.
Yeah. And even at times, it's not just validating the story, it's helping them develop the story. And there's been a number of engagements where, you know, the story that the investment banker thinks is the right story at the beginning of the project, after we get done going through and telling them how the company really works, how it comes together, there might be a better way to sell the story, to put it together. Steve, I'm sorry, Michael, can you talk about the key areas of focus and the benefits of finance?
Sure. Like Steve was saying, as we get involved, either through the seller or through the investment bank, we want to get in as early as possible, so that we can listen. A lot of times everybody just wants to hurry up, including the seller wants to hurry up and get to market, and they really don't take that 2 steps back. Why am I selling? What are the strengths of my company? Asking all those hard questions up front, that the buy side team's going to ask, that the potential buyer is going to ask. What are they inheriting? What's really driving your business? What channels are you marketing to? Where aren't you marketing? All those little things that come up definitely come out because guys like us can get involved, and you as investment bankers or any other consultants, because they listen. I've seen it even on our audit side. Everybody thinks the audit is that golden goose, but a lot of times the auditors, they don't listen. They're here to test and check off and make sure everything's good. But the listening part will help you craft that story, assess the story, and then you can move down the line, kind of to where Steve and I would get involved, doing that heavy crunch of data, the analytics, the profitability studies, all those little things that don't get done in an audit, may not be done because they don't have a good C-suite that's doing that work. And that's, if you can show that stuff is there, that reporting capability is there, it's going to help you create your story, create this thing better, and get you to overall a better deal. I would say that the key area of focus is first to listen and assess, and then move on to analyze and enhance for sale. So,
okay. How about the benefits of the sell side? Michael?
Obviously, you can never quantify the true benefit. We like to say that we might get you an extra turn, or who knows. But the true benefit ends up being that seller really knows why he's selling, understands what the process will be down the road. Because a lot of times you're dealing with, and I'm sure everybody in this room, it's a first time seller, and it may be a first time buyer. So you might have, in essence, 2 rookies in the room that may not see eye to eye or may not understand where each one is coming from. So by understanding all that up front, that really makes it an easier process. It's going to make your job as an investment banker out there to go out and market a heck of a lot easier, because the story is known and the seller is completely engaged. That engagement is enormous.
And I'll add a couple of those comments too. Looking at the company and the comment Mike made about the management team, a lot of times that's a great example of us going in there knowing that if we were on the buy side, and it would be different if we were representing a private equity firm buyer or we were representing a strategic buyer. There's different ways that we would look at the management team and the needs of the buyer in those situations. And so we're just applying that again here as part of the seller and counsel. And certainly, I think, certainly not all the time, but it's not uncommon that by going through the process, we help probably almost all the time investment bankers kind of know it based on their discussions with the team that, we got a weakness in management here or there, however we might need to shuffle the decks, but we can help validate that. And again, it doesn't happen all the time, obviously, but many times that's a good example of kind of that intangible benefit. looked at the quantifiable EBITDA improvements by going through the process, and obviously, you're right, it's somewhat subjective. Some of it's easy to say, we did this, we did that, we found $250,000 here or something there, but in general, based on studying this, it's increasing EBITDA somewhere around 10%. It's always something positive. I mean, not to say we wouldn't find negative or bring up negative if it was there, but I think what it shows is the process really helps to vet a lot of things that by digging into things that it wouldn't come to light if you didn't go through the process.
Yeah, and I think when you do find that negative, you have time in front of you to vet it, and spin it if you have to. And maybe you can find something quantifiable to offset it, or at least you're out in front of it. Those are those things I think we call them red X's that pop up. We don't like for them to come up after the buy side diligence starts. We want, especially on our clients, we want to make sure that those things will all come out so we can either refute from the buyer side or from the seller side to the buyer, or create value somewhere else to offset it.
And I think that's one of the key points of sell side due diligence is the ability for the sell side to take control of the issues and to get out ahead of it, as well as enhance value, and address issues proactively. Steve, can you talk about the timing of engagement and execution, what that does to the timing of the deal process?
Yeah, certainly the easy answer to the timing is sooner the better, and I think we all know that. The earlier you get in and work with the team to most likely find issues and give yourself time to put them in the right light or help remediate them many times. And working on a deal now that's been going on seems like a lifetime. That's a little exaggeration, but we found a lot of issues getting in there, and fortunately the seller and the investment bankers were able to realize the best thing here was to put the deal on hold and wait 6 months. But anyways, timing, other than the earlier we get in there, the better, normally seems to come up when the investment bank is looking at starting the sim. We're getting close. Let's get you guys engaged. It's a point in time when generally you can have that conversation with your client. Although I will say more and more so that it is backing up to the day that the engagement letter is signed, or as I think Tom said at lunch at our table, being part of the engagement letter, your engagement letter as the investment bank with your client, that they need to go through this process and getting that going up front. The process, if there was a normal, is 3 to 4 weeks, and if it's a fairly straightforward process, we're not really slowing things down because there's a lot of work that you're obviously doing simultaneously. And again, if it's seamless and straightforward, you're sharing information and helping to build the sim and the story as well as the sell-side diligence process. But that's in a normal situation, which we all know in this business. There's no such thing as normal in M&A. It really does depend. And there's examples we've worked on, I think, where this process really can add value, where it tends to be more so manufacturers, but if they've gone through significant performance improvement initiatives, close plants, move stuff, added product lines, all sorts of the fun stuff that businesses do to get in there early and help to really understand the economic impact of that, build the story again, to use that phrase over and over again, and help validate it is huge, and that takes some time.
And part of that time is the scope. How does the scope vary from project to project?
Yeah, and scope is all over the board, I guess, is kind of the example I started on the last one. If there is a straightforward, it looks very similar to a buy-side diligence scope, but it really is, the range is as wide as this room or wider, and probably as deep too. And also, what oftentimes we get involved in is more limited look up front to try and convince your client to pay our fees because they're engaging. You guys obviously have a contingent fee. There's more to the story than that, but they view they're going to pay you when the deal closes. Why do I got to pay these guys up front? So a lot of times it can be more limited up front, and then frankly, I think every time we do that, we show the value and it leads to something else. The scopes can be very involved, layered in technology, operations, all sorts of things, benefits, tax. It seems to be everybody wants to kind of drive to that basic plain vanilla, again, if there is such a thing, financial scope. But the more you look at the opportunity, the more you can shore up all these other areas, the better.
I would agree. I think everybody wants the financial side of the financial house to be in order, but getting to the understanding or the economic understanding of all the business decisions you've made over the last 2 or 3 years to get your business where it was or where it is today, it needs to kind of be brought out. If you've got a first-time buyer that's showing up, they don't know what a gut feeling is on a sale or a gut feeling is on why you made a decision to move the plant. This matrix moved over here, this cell moved over here. They don't understand that. They don't know it. So the more you can quantify that total economic picture, makes a big difference for the buyer. So that's worth its weight in more potential dollars for your seller. Being in there earlier the better. It gets us the ability to bring in our tax folks and let them talk to the seller and understand what his or her take's going to be. They may not understand, okay, here's the funding, and that's not enough. All of a sudden, they look at you like a deer in the headlights. Hey, that's not enough. And that is not a fun conversation to have. So, you want to have that conversation early so that we can hopefully help find some other value to push that price to where they need it to be. Believe me, I'm going through a home sale right now, and I swear my broker thinks I'm crazy because I want to get X. He's like, you should take it off the market if you really want that, because he thinks I'm crazy. But that happens. People want to quantify and get that couple extra thousand or a couple extra 100,000 in most cases, and they need to be told that this is what it is. This is what you may or may not get.
Yeah, that's a great point, and really emphasizing how the scope on these projects tend to evolve, because getting in and doing the base analysis, let's call it that, and seeing things that you can then go back and have those tough conversations. So the client certainly doesn't want to hear this is going to take longer and cost more money. You say, look, here's all the holes in your financial information, and if we can help you model out certain things and really demonstrate that some of these improvements are sustainable, and the margin improvement, to use that example, and you can model out the impact of that, and then you can lay down, again, concert teamwork with the entire team to say we're going to add $1 million of EBITDA just to make up a number, and obviously we can all do the math on X times a million, so well worth our fees and paid for it many times over. So they tend to, again, be value creation exercises, and I think that's clearly only one of the benefits. I mean, the kind of started because deals were falling apart. Microphone there. So,
So yeah, it's that valuation issue though is another one that's good to know up front. I mean, if the seller thinks they've got $5 million every time, and they're banking on getting that type of sale price or valuation based on that, it's really 3. Knowing that up front before you take the investment banker takes it to market, goes through the process, wastes all that time. Even if the deal doesn't go forward because the numbers aren't where they want it to be, it's a benefit to everyone because we realistically know what to expect. So, Michael, can you talk about the deliverables? What is a deliverable on the sell side engagement?
I mean, we've seen it in, kind of three different ways. We've seen it as kind of being part of the internal management team and helping them create, not a full report where we would stamp, stamp FG&K or BKD on it. It might end up being really just helping them build the sim with the broker. It could be helping create and populate the data room with all the reporting that's needed. We obviously do a full report. I'm sure you guys do too. But to me, that extra dollars that are spent on a full report with our stamp on it doesn't always make sense to the seller. It depends on what they want to have, where they're going to market with it. But most cases for us, it's churning in that back room, working in the kitchen with their teams, putting everything together to populate the data room for all those questions that the buy side is going to ask, and kind of create value for them in that respect. Me putting my BKD logo on it doesn't make it any more professional. We always like to do that if we can, but not necessary. In some cases, it's a very scaled back where their team is pretty good and they want just a little validation around what they're going to put in the sim. I'm sure you've seen your fair amount of sims that have these estimated numbers on them where they're, T&E was 100,000, 50% of it's the sellers. It's not essential, something like that. So. We like to get those things vetted out up front, so that, although it may not be a deliverable in our case, but it's definitely shored up on the sim. But from our perspective, it's more or less a giant book for the seller and the seller's team to have along with the investment banker.
I'd add what you touched on. A big part of the deliverable then, after all that, is having us there at the table to help tell the story, articulate why the story is solid. As you said, many times we don't play that role at all. The management team's solid, we're just handing over the information, so to speak, and they take it from there. And that's obviously, I would say, ideal, but many times, especially in the lower end of the middle market, the management team, you just can't get them there to understand what we're even doing because that's not how they operate their business. They're not financial people. Many times they just operate businesses profitably because they're pretty good at making widgets, but they don't necessarily know what the cost build-up of their product is. And my point of that is there's a lot of different scenarios where we play that, sitting at the table, helping to explain. Got to be careful here. We're not defending and we're not selling the company, and we're not rewarded for any of those roles either, but there is a way to play a significant part at the discussion table through diligence, before diligence, first bids, etc.
Yeah, I've seen it where I've seen our fair share of big four firms put a nice report out there, stamp it, it's sell, but then it's literally timestamp. That's it. I've seen it where the seller gets it and then they're okay to it. They all of a sudden, I'm getting one last week has ended 2012 on it. Like, oh yeah, Deloitte did this. Did a fantastic job, but it's 2012. It's 2015. Did they come back and re-up it? No, they probably want to pay it again. So that if they're in a market where it's going to take a long time to sell, hitting that reissuing that report is not going to be cheap. So we like to do it, get in early, get in often, and continue to keep it updated all the way through the sell process, or at least give the tools to the management team or the seller so that they can continue to grow that. So
yeah, that's a great point. And I think one other part of the deliverable, Tom said briefly earlier, as we're saying, to get the issues out of the table, and sometimes I think you have issues in a business, especially if they haven't been audited or their financial systems are less than cutting edge, we'll say, that you really need to put issues in a box. And one of the very first sell sides I did is still one of the better examples just because the result was huge. And it was a technology-driven company, and their accounting was all messed up for how they were doing things. Now, I'm going to pause and say this exercise is not about accounting. Accounting is the foundation of everything we're talking about. But this particular case, it was purely an accounting issue. And since they didn't have the systems, didn't track the right information, you were never going to figure out what gap was. It just was impossible. But at least through going through this process, we were able to put it in a box, we were able to show the cash flow from this part of the business, we were able to kind of triangulate a way for a buyer to look at the issue and ultimately get comfortable enough and like the business enough that they paid a great multiple in this case, and everybody was happy.
Great.
You know, as an investment banker, and I definitely agree with the sell-side diligence. Not only does it help, helping the client identify potential due diligence risks from the financial side, but as an investment banker, it helps us complement the book. And a lot of what we see is with our privately held clients, they may not have the resources or the talent available in their CFO suite or controller suite or bookkeeper suite, whatever it is, where they're really putting their financials in a bucket. And a lot of questions we get as investment bankers are, we want to see, profitability by division or profitability by product line or inventory component. How, we know what the inventory number is and we know that you did a physical, but how are these terms by product A, product B, product C? And these are all questions that we see in market. And if we can have data available to use in our offering materials regarding those key components, that does show more sophistication for a client, that does impact their value, and the client also receives that education there. So it's a big help from an investment banking standpoint to have those questions answered and not have the buyer compute them for you. Because then we're on the other side where the buyer says, hey, this is your terms for inventory, and then we have to re-vet it out, and then we got to hire you guys anyway to do it. And there's going to be more money because they're redoing the process rather than taking that initiative. That's kind of been my experience.
I would agree with from a former auditor, reformed auditor, whatever you want to call me at that point. I wish we could get onto all of our clients and do this sell-side diligence for them well in advance to have them understand more about their businesses. It usually, we've come across this over the years with some of our audit clients where the bank, especially back in 08 when the downturn happened, all the banks were throwing their consultants out and saying, oh, make them more profitable. And, all of a sudden, like, hey, we got to pay $100,000 to this consulting firm and they're gonna tell us move our inventory faster. Well, they probably will. And they were apprehensive at first. I had 2 clients actually went through it. But I was ecstatic for them to do that because it made them a better company today. And when they sell, maybe this year, maybe next, they're going to be better for it. So, we love to get involved at the broker time. Getting our clients even earlier than that is beyond measurable.
Yeah, that's a great point, Craig. I think, it's very simple to say that if the company just goes to market, and let's say even does $5 million to use a number, the only thing that's going to happen in buy-side diligence, that number's going down. Maybe you can keep it the same and kind of pulling it back to an issue basis, whatever the component of, in your example, whatever that's driving the profitability. Again, if you just leave it hanging out there as an issue, hope nobody sees it, that won't happen anymore. The diligence processes, buyers have to be much more careful, as we know. Part of what I didn't answer as to what's driving this is that buyers have to make educated decisions, so they're going to make sure they find those issues. And at least if you shore up the answer in the story, you've got a defendable position. And I've participated in discussions and diligence alongside, the investment banker who says, here's the issue, here's what these guys came up with, and you're just going to have to kind of accept it because you're not going to you're not going to exactly know what margin is by product because the company doesn't have it. But here's a framework, and you need to accept that and go on. You've got a good asset, obviously, you can make that argument. If you don't, that's a harder argument for you to make, but it's possible.
One second. So as a quick follow-up, we talked about the value from the sell side, but what's your perception on the value of that deliverable when when in the hands of the buyer when they're looking at these potential deals. A deal that has a sell side due diligence and deals that don't.
Yeah, certainly I've had private equity clients tell me if we get 100 books a week, we take the 10 that have this and put it into this pile that we're really paying closer attention to. It's a way to distinguish your deal from everybody else's deal. And, you know, said probably more accurately how they're looking at it is it just, they know this smaller pile that somebody's gone through the process. So the likelihood the numbers are valid is much higher, and that's probably worth their time more so than the pile that doesn't have it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the garden that's going to weed is going to yield the most flowers. It's just the place to go. And if you go through it that way, you know, and get those little blips out of the open and get everything squared away, it's much better than the buy side. I mean, of the sell side reports we've seen, you know, it makes our buy side diligence go a little faster, saves a little money for our clients because we could build off of what was there, even if it wasn't up to date. We can ask for that same information updated. The company's gone through it, so they get it. They know what we're asking. You know, there's times we ask for stuff. I'm sure you do too, and they're like, "What?" And it's
What's your close up?
yeah. You know, and you hate having those hard discussions with the seller because a lot of times, you know, you could, you know, when we go in there and guns blazing buy side diligence, you know, it's not a pretty picture. You know, the seller wants to you want to make your seller feel good. They can turn around and say, here, so we have that already. So that's, you know, we like to see a proud seller as much as we don't like to overpay when we're on the buy side, but you know, if that stuff is there and it's vetted and it's done, you know, that's great. You know, our buyers love that. I mean, it saves them some time. They've got their own, you know, boards behind them that they want to show what the deal is. And the quicker they can get it returned, the better.
Let me go to our first. Art?
So I'm curious. You know, we've heard your perspectives about, you know, how good an idea it is to do some advanced quality earnings diligence in advance of the sale. And if you take sort of three different situations or company situations, one where the company's had a couple of years of audited financials, one where the company hasn't, but does engage in some of this quality earnings diligence in advance of a sale or auction process, and then one where the company has not had either of the foregoing. And when you're looking at it or approaching it from a buy side, explain your experience in terms of the different dynamics that happen in these different scenarios.
Yeah, I think, you know, no audit, no sell side diligence, those are fun. On the buy side, it's like open field running. You're going to find issues, you're going to be able to come up with all sorts of things. And maybe to illustrate even what you can find in an audit. So audited financials, you know that they've gone through an audit process. And yes, I'm also a reformed auditor, but that was many, many years ago, because I already said how long I've been doing this. But even in an audit, it just means the numbers are, you know, fairly representative according to GAAP. Well, a great example is accruals. And you can, you know, especially if it's a business, many service businesses or manufacturers that have complex accruals, that the best you can do at the end of the year is, you know, look at the facts that you have at that time and come up with an accrual, and that's great for an audit. It's absolutely appropriate. But when I come in 6 months later representing a buyer, I guarantee you that accrual wasn't right, and I'm going to be armed with the facts to be able to make adjustments to the audit. Again, turn that. So in the sell side process, you can take the audit. You know, number one, you can correct for things like that. And sometimes, you know, it's an important byproduct of this too. I think more often than not, you know, as we've said already, you can come up with positive adjustments, but sometimes they are negative. But at least you can tell the seller up front, this is reality. You're going to have to deal with it. The price is not 12 million; it's 11. And whatever. But back to the audit, your question, there's a lot of things in the audit, because an audit's judgmental, and it's based on materiality and samples, and you can come up with a lot of things just based on the numbers, but the whole big area that isn't addressing an audit at all is what are the operations doing? Are the revenues sustainable? Is the cost structure sustainable? What does a buyer need to do this to this business? You know, which usually means add more people to actually run it and grow it. I mean, there's this whole myriad of issues that an audit shouldn't address, and it doesn't address. So, you know, that gives you, the audit at least gives you comfort, the bottom line income statement. And I've never gone in, and if I could, I've concluded by signing an agreement to say, wow, this was a bad audit. That's never happened. It's not going to happen.
It's never been a bad audit.
No. But, you know, there's so much more to this. And again, that's kind of the simple way I look at it, that that's just the numbers and that's the foundation of what guys like us do. And it's all this other stuff on top of the real.
One of my best clients, when I first started doing this, said, you know what EBITDA stands for? I said, no. He said, earnings before entry done auditors. So, you know, that was, I think I was 21, 22, remember that one? That's just fantastic. You know, and it scares you for the audit profession, because, you know, these guys are out there taking risks every day trying to get, you know, audited numbers on a company that, you know, at times the seller is doing things that he shouldn't be doing, and does trick dumb auditors. I get that. I mean, that happens. But, you know, it's our job in the diligence phase to blow an audit out of the water at times and make it, you know, dollar for dollar accurate, because we take that estimation points out of it. You know, there's past adjustments in audits that never show up, and you don't see them unless you ask for them. There's a little more clarity now around some of the audit communications that have to be done if you request them. But there's definitely past adjustments that could be substantial from a materiality standpoint. Some of those materiality levels get pretty big on a $5 million EBITDA. So it's definitely, that's another one of those things to really ask for, is ask for those past adjustments.
When you're looking at what you guys are doing, we're all doing due diligence. You know, any of those adjustments are multiples. It's not just whether or not you fit into a materiality bucket. It's multiples of it ends up being real dollars. And just to kind of further the point, you know, a balance sheet audit. An audit is a balance sheet type of exercise. The P&L comes out of an audit of the balance sheet. On due diligence, whether it's buy side or sell side, it's really a deep dive on the P&L, on the operations, like Steve said. And the balance sheet sort of comes out, and you focus on the balance sheet to firm up the operation. They're sort of mirror exercises. So that's why, even though you've got an audit, there's still lots of benefits when you have going through an analysis.
Do you have any recommendation for good due diligence checklists, both on the financial and legal ends?
I'm sure Steve's are pretty good. Mine's pretty good too. Yeah, sure knows. But I mean, from a checklist perspective, I think you know, there's you Google it, you'll find it. There's definitely stuff out there, but you know, from a nugget perspective of stuff that we can share, you know, asking for past adjustment, you know, little things that, you know, probably don't get by. I mean, you know, when we start going into these now, you know, a lot of our private equity buyers are so sophisticated, they're asking for profit velocity, you know, inventory, how many turns of inventory by SKU, all this stuff. So you can get as granular as you want, you know, from a checklist perspective. Knowing your seller or knowing that the company you're buying, if they can even possibly present that information, is probably the way you should tailor it. Obviously, the more sophisticated the suite, the better, the more experience they're going to have at getting that information. So you choose how you want to almost offend the seller by the length of your checklist or the thickness of your checklist.
And I think, I'll echo the, yeah, I'm sure you can Google it, comment, but even when we started engagement, I mean, I have a standard scope that we'll start with, but it's never the standard scope. And I think it's really the experience of doing this, 300 times or whatever it's been, where you can look at a situation and modify that scope. So I'd say you can certainly get a standard checklist, but I would always caution against using a standard checklist. Great example, I was on the buy side recently, was private equity add-on that I was looking at, and no checklist would ever catch this. And I was just having a conversation with the CFO about their business and what they've been doing and how they've improved profitability. And long story short, they were able to use Obamacare to push all the health care onto their employees, and somehow they kept all their employees busy. I think that's somewhat of an interesting trick. But their profit improvement, a big part of it was, well, we don't have healthcare expense anymore. My client wasn't really excited about that dynamic in this business. Certainly it was an EBITDA adjustment, but that really wasn't the issue. I mean, the EBITDA adjustment was an issue, but it was, they did what? I mean, it was, we're going to try and roll this into, first of all, we're going to roll it into a company that does have health insurance, so that goes away right away. But secondly, we like to take care of our employees. Discussion was what I had with my client. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's where I would say, from a checklist perspective, you want to keep it or make it go broader than narrow. Giving them something they can easily check box and say, yes, we have, no, we don't, yes, we have, no, we don't. Some of that stuff needs to be open-ended question that you may end up going through in person with them as well, to really get them talking and understand the stories that they're telling. But it should cover financial as well as tax, as well as operational. For our IT folks in the room, there should be some IT around it too, especially if there's potential for that company that you're buying to be a platform, or maybe utilize their servers or whatever's going to end up happening. From an IT perspective, you want to make sure they've got that set. Integrating, we've seen accounting systems that are easy to integrate to each other and some that aren't. We've come across green screens from, I don't know, definitely before I was born. They're great systems. I look at them, I said, this thing blows, even Epicor and Sage out the window, because your job tracking system is green screen. It's fantastic. They couldn't print to a PDF. They had to print me by 11 by 17 paper. And I thought the lady, the bookkeeper, was going to kill me because I was in the system one day tinkering through and I hit print. I'm like, oh, I want that report. It's 1,800 pages, and it started printing on the dot matrix printer downstairs. And it was not. She came upstairs yelling. But so you got to be careful. But that IT portion is definitely a big piece as well. So.
Just from my perspective, whether it's buy side or sell side, I haven't found a good checklist that is really comprehensive enough. At best, that they've been memory joggers, or just potential topics to cover. But really, I think probably the three of us, when we test, each engagement is a custom scope, custom project process of looking at what the risks are, what's happening with the company design.
As a selling company, assuming your accounting firm's of the level that you would hire to do a sell side due diligence, so what are the AICPA rules or whatever? The company using its existing accounting/auditing firm. I mean, I assume if you have your financials audited, you can't use that accounting firm to do your sell side due diligence, but if they're only reviewed, you could. Or what are the advantages and disadvantages if you have that flexibility?
make sure I heard the question. So what are the AICPA rules around the auditor also doing sell-side due diligence?
The independent session.
There is no preclusion at all. This is certainly something that is completely allowed under AICPA rules and SEC rules. And in fact, oftentimes there's tremendous benefit to doing that. I've certainly represented where it's, especially a bigger company where you're the auditors, there's a lot of complexity to it, and that institutional knowledge to sit down with my audit partner and understand the business and then do this process is a lot more efficient than tossing it over and letting you start from the beginning. So it's not precluded at all.
The independence issues really come in when you start having contingent fees. obviously as an auditor, you have to be independent. There can't be any perception of different motives of the answers you're coming up with. You don't necessarily have that independence issue with the sell-side consulting engagements, diligence engagements that we're talking about, but it doesn't impair your independence in doing that project.
A follow-up question, are the CPA firms nervous that there's some kind of a liability risk with the buyer relying on the sell-side report?
Well,
We protect ourselves from
Yeah,
that, of course.
read the engagement letters, they say we do nothing and plan on nothing, but, you know, but, I think there's always, right. You want to make me say that, right? The bigger issue ends up being at times, and I've seen it, where we would be doing some sell-side work for another firm that did the audit, because they didn't have anybody that they could dispose to do that, and we might find holes in their audit, and that's not pretty. That to me is the only time you'd love to have your own guys in there doing the sell-side who did the audit. More than likely, you're not using the same team, so and you really don't want to. I wouldn't want to. But you know, in smaller firms, I can see that happening. But you know, you really don't want to. And if you do find something, you can have everybody in the room to talk about it. But you hope in most cases. I mean, the audits these days it's hard to get around missing stuff. The amount of checklists we have, you talk about checklists, the checklists on the audit side. I don't know how people don't. It's unbelievable the amount of checklists that you actually have to do to get through an audit. So I think you know, more often than not, you're not going to find gap issues from doing that, but you will find those little things like little nuggets of past adjustments and little off accruals, because you'll have the hindsight of 2020 vision from hindsight maybe 6 months down the road to say, hey, that accrual was we missed it a little bit, but that's kind of where it's at.
I mean, back when this was new, different firm and role I was in, debated that very question with armies of attorneys and auditors and leadership, and my view was a couple things on top of what we've already said. But first of all, the likelihood, as you were just saying, of we're going to find something wrong in the audit. I mean, it better be infinitesimal. Otherwise, you asked the question from the perspective of the CPA firms. If the CPA firms worried about guys like us coming in and finding problems on an audit, we got other problems. That's my view. And as you said, I think that risk is very, very small. But the other thing is, if you do, I'd rather, if you find a problem, it's better that it's you than me. Because if I'm coming in from the outside, and I'm representing a client, they're going to make an issue of it. And at least if you're going to mitigate it. So again, I think that's so remote is the real driver of that from the audit standpoint, the risk is really, really small.
Yeah. I think, Jen, the question, Dave brought up a point that I think, maybe let's look at it just slightly differently. What liability, how much are the buyers relying on what we put together, the reports, versus then still continuing to do their process? And how does it affect that? Because I think that's what Dave was going to ask. If we could, are we worried that the buyers are going to get sued from the buyers? And I think there's a difference.
So every firm that does this for a living, as Mike said, we will not release our report to a buyer unless the release letter is signed, which basically absolves us of all liability. Now, why is that? Very simply, the foundation of that is I was hired by my client to do a set scope of work. I'm not representing you, the buyer, so you would look at things differently. And that, again, as I said earlier on how did this start in Europe, it's completely turned upside down in Europe. I mean, you, the buyer, I'm hired by the client to do this, but I'm responsible to you, the buyer. And so there is heightened litigation risk there. It also costs about 5 or 6 times more in terms of fees, because there's so much more work to do to get there. And I think in the litigious United States, I don't see us getting to the point that we do that here in the US, and I also know clients really aren't willing to pay 6 times my fees to get the same result for them, but just lawyered up to get there.
I mean, from being on our buy side world, you know, like I said a couple minutes ago, each engagement is a custom project. We sit down with the buyer and say, all right, here's the target. What are you interested in? What are you concerned about? What's really going on here? And, you know, we'll design the scope and the process that we go through with the buyer to make sure we address their concerns, address any concerns we may have, and so, you know, just we wouldn't be able to make that blanket assumption, blanket scope that would cover all the buyer's needs. And so therefore, you know, we work for the seller. And we in this particular situation, we work for the seller. We engineer the engagement and all that. So, David, do you have a question?
Do you ever evaluate or comment on projections?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And
That gets a little bit more challenging many times, but yeah, absolutely, that's could be a big part of what this is. Got to be careful on the word there, but certainly, you know, helping to assess the projections, tying it to historical basis.
Yeah, I mean, I know ours goes in this too. There's a whole page of reasons of why we, you know, what we're doing with projections, and who can rely on it, who can do this. Quite a bit. If there is a full report that there's projections in it, it's got a pretty lawyered up 6 paragraphs that talk about who can rely on it. But I mean, like you said, we want to vet out the assumptions, and that's really all that we can do at that point. But yeah, it is done.
That is one, going back to the prior question. It gets very gray when you're the auditors, and many times you just can't do it.
Right.
And certainly if it's a public company, you can't.
You know, we certainly, we're very limited on how much we can talk about the achievability projections, but tying the assumptions back to historical trends. You know, the company was doing this forever, and all of a sudden, this or made this adjustment in the projection. You know, we can certainly highlight that and talk about, all right, here's the differences between historical and projected numbers and detail it out, but whether or not it's achievable, I mean, there's a million reasons on whether or not it will be achievable or won't be achievable. So, talking about what's built into it, the mechanics of the projections, it's probably easier for us to get our arms around than the results of the projection. Right?
I think too, it's a good example of the underlying theme of helping to tell the story and not validate in this case, helping to tell the story. You know, instead of a hockey stick projection in a sim, we break it down because we've got that, you know, mentality of if I was a buyer, how would I look at this? So you can say, well, they've added this channel and this product and these salespeople, and, you know, you can help present the assumptions in a more detailed way that, again, if you're engaged to do that, can be very meaningful to a buyer. Then they can get pointed to the key assumptions, and it's their decision whether to buy off of the assumptions or not, but it's better than saying revenue growth 30% next year.
We have similar situations too, where the buyer actually has, oh, we're gonna do this, and this. These are the synergies we're gonna create. Okay, sure. Is that gonna happen this year, 5 years from now? It's the same kind of flip side atmosphere of, you know, kind of a projection. So you tread lightly. You know, we tread lightly in those situations.
So we've been talking a lot about the different benefits and what goes into financial due diligence. And I think with this last little segment, let's try and take it and make it as applicable, or talk about the application to the MBBI members who are working on middle market deals. How do they, you know, how can they use this on every deal, or should they use this on every deal? And what are the cost benefits?
I mean, for obviously for anybody who's ever tried to get your seller to do this, cost becomes number one, and one more person in the kitchen becomes number two. So, you know, getting them over those humps is the first, but, you know, getting them to see the value even if you have someone like us come in and do a first pass, we try, our platform a little bit is a first phase 1, phase 2, or phase 1 is get in there, kind of show them what's wrong, show them what we would help them with, or help them strengthen their story. And then say, hey, if you want us to continue to go, this is what we'll help you with. Or, we could be done right here, if your team wants to take it from here, go for it. If they want to engage us for the full product, or at least to get it to SIM, we're more than happy to do that. But, that's important. It's a tough sell, but I think it's well worth it. I think any broker who's had a couple deals blow up on them in the last minute or during buy-side diligence can easily attest to why you would do it. You guys probably have more anecdotes than we do about why stuff blows up. But I think if there's ever a chance to talk through it with them, the time saved both on the seller's team, so they can continue to operate their business, so there's not that deal turned down when you're trying to get to sell, so that you're not grabbing your best people to help you with your deal. Your deal, all the checklists, all this, pulling all the data together. People can actually do their day-to-day job because we can help facilitate that a little faster. Giving them back time to do their real job is probably the key driver that I always try to push for them as to why they should use us.
Yeah, I think both of us would say that when you're trying to commit someone, bring someone like us out, engage us in the conversation. We can give examples of where this has worked, which again I think is about 99% of the time, and that 1% probably that deal shouldn't have happened anyways. But kind of letting them run the business and working on one now where they kind of hand off the whole financial diligence, monthly updating of the EBITDA to us, and it's costing them whatever, $50,000 a month, let's say. But they have focused on their business, and they're driving an incremental $100,000 a month in EBITDA, so that's really simple math. What the operators operate is their business. Don't let them try and be M&A professionals. It's not their business.
Yeah, giving back everybody time is a big key. You almost can't quantify it.
And from what I've noticed, the ones that are hardest to sell on the front end where they're just, like, I think Steve, you said it's just, or maybe it's Michael, one more hand up front, one more bit up front in the process. Those are the ones that end up with very quickly going, oh, I get it now. You found the $250,000 adjustment. That could be, over $1 million more in value to it. So the fee is not, those are the ones that quickly turn and they get it. But it's a hard sell on the front end. So, Art.
I have a question. Most of us can do the math in the context of the deal. Recent deal I completed was an 8x. So to help us, help you put it in perspective for a client of ours that might be a prospective client for you or another accountant, what range of cost for this level of exercise, doing it in advance, should we be, maybe touting as, look, you can spend this much, but in the context of sort of the industry multiple for your deal, if you find this amount, you do the math on that, and then it sort of puts it in perspective right away for them. And recognizing your range might be a broad range, it would just be helpful if we sort of had an understanding what that broad range of cost might be.
We usually just tell them it's about 20% of the fees.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I don't think it will work, but
we obviously it's hard to paint that one exactly, but it's it can, for us in a typical deal size of let's say 25 to 40 million, it can be 15,000 an upfront kick of prior up to a year-long engagement at 15,000 a month. It depends on what you need. It's very you guys have all seen the buy side costs. It's very similar as far as I'm concerned. So
Yeah, I mean, similar answer, but not to duck the question, even though it's a good one to
Right.
duck, but, you know, it's 40 to 80 where the bell curve lies, probably, you know, as we've said, there's a lot of limited scope stuff you can do less than that, and I've been involved some pretty complicated ones with a lot of manufacturing analysis and stuff that's 300 grand, so, or length of time.
yeah, it could be the time that you, but you know, they're probably typically, I mean, more often than not, the companies that are already audited and have some sophistication already, it should be less. I mean, it just should be, especially if they have a decent suite that's doing some profitability work or some contribution margin work. If that stuff's being done, we're going to more vet than we are going to create, and that ends up being obviously cost less at that point. For your company, like you mentioned before, someone who's just has a compilation or a tax return, and the seller runs the business, and you know they're very profitable, but he runs his entire family, you know, every expense of the business. You know, it'll be a little bit more of a carve, and probably a little more time. So it'll really depend, but it's not unlike the buy side diligence fees you guys have seen from us for years.
Let's see the content. Any more questions?